So welcome to our psychological safety, one of our table talks today. We've got a few more people joining, so I will keep an eye on as they join. We're going to be going over today about leveraging PI and DISC for creating psychological safety. And so I'm super excited to have Deb Best here with me today to have this conversation. This is part of a series that we've been doing where we do a deep dive on different topics as they relate to psychological safety. And so we've done everything from new employees to digital spaces. And so we'll continue with that, until I run out of ideas, which is never. Okay. Never. So before we get started, let's talk about what is psychological safety. Let's make sure we're all thinking about it similarly. How I really lean on is, these were the 6 areas that Google identified when they did their research back in 2015. That is basically how you have a psychologically safe organization. You do have these 6 things happening. But psychological safety also includes the structures and the outside external environment in which the organization exists, right? So we're going to be talking about the people that are within the organization and how understanding their assessments, who they are, and how they show up can help establish psychological safety in your organization. Okay, so why now? Well, one thing is we are welcoming a lot of new people to the family, right? We've had this huge transition with people changing roles, joining organizations, and maybe as we have our go back to work strategy, they're meeting each other for the first time in person. I'm getting ready to go to my first HR event. My second one in person, right? So getting to meet people that I feel like I know, but I've never actually met. That's a different way of existing and having our relationship. So understanding the psychological safety that exists in your organization is critical to how people come together as they either join or meet in person. The other is that as we architect our future of work strategy and think about how we want to continue to evolve into an ongoing hybrid workplace, understanding psychological safety and how that shows up for us and the ways in which we can lean into that can help us be more effective. The other thing is that if chances are you are investing in some kind of pivot, some change in your business. I read an article that showed that 60% of CEOs for 2022 were planning to acquire other organizations. So that means that we're going to be bringing either new people into the family. We're going to be having to pivot based on the kind of never-ending pandemic that seems to be how we live our lives. And so with that, in order to absorb that change, in order to tap into innovation, psychological safety is a critical component of what you need. And so that would be another reason why this is important now. The other thing is that chaos continues to surround us. Things are constantly changing, as they call it in the military. We live in a VUCA world, which is volatile, uncertain, chaotic, and ambiguous. And so understanding ourselves and understanding others using assessments helps us build trust and create the platform for enabling psychological safety and identifying psychosocial risks. All right. So with that, Deb, you and I came up with this topic together because we both use assessments. But why do you think assessments are helpful in establishing psychological safety and reinforcing it?
Well, we're talking about predictive index, PI, and DISC, and we've both used them. So the big thing first is, they talk about put the oxygen mask on yourself. The wonderful thing about an assessment is it gives you a sense of who you are. It's data that it's literally data in a report that gives you some insight into yourself, not another human being giving you feedback as to who you are, but it gives you data to reflect on and to not only know what makes you tick internally, what are your, what are your hot spots? What are your triggers? You're the psychologist, Al, I'm not, but what triggers you, what gives you energy. And I think that also you talk about psychological safety. The opposite of that is fear. So it could be fear of conflict, fear of other people, fear of anything. So the assessments provide data that about yourself that you got to start with yourself in order to interact well with others. So the other piece about assessments are then getting, again, data that is not from another person, but data from this assessment that gives you basically a cookbook or a scorecard on how to relate to others who are like you, others who are not like you. And I think the big thing with assessments, it's not only appreciation for other people and to complement your skills and who you are, but also what do you need from the interaction? It talks about needs. And this is very common in all assessments. What does the other person need? What do you need? And I'm also a New York State trained mediator. And the first thing we're taught in mediation training is the source of all human conflict is needs met and unmet. So you talk about that fear of conflict, that fear in general. If you understand what your needs are and through these assessments and what others' needs are, again, as a mediator, usually don't have assessments to determine that. You have to keep asking people what their needs are. I mean, this is a huge lift in terms of helping ourselves build our own psychological safety and helping other people feel safe.
And when we ask about other people, or we seek to understand more about them, what does that help us understand about how we interact with them and how we show up and, how we can kind of meet each other where we are?
Yes, exactly. It not only, I think, again, it gives you the cookbook to self-reflect, that I don't need to sit with somebody. Frankly, listen, I've been in HR for 33 years. I mean, a leader or coach giving you feedback is awesome, but isn't it great to have data that you can self-reflect on your own, that it makes it more objective, right? It's as objective as you can get when it comes to being self-reflective and assessing others. And that's why I'm kind of an assessment geek, for that reason.
And I realized, Deb, we hopped right into this conversation.
We did.
We didn't introduce ourselves.
That's all right. We can do it now. Let's build trust.
Let's have psychological safety. And
absolutely.
Kind of admit that big mistake. So real quickly, my name is Dr. Alessandra Polizzi. I'm the CEO of Verdant Consulting. You can see my logo right behind me. Our company provides training and programs on resiliency, psychological safety, emotional agility, based on my 30 years of education and 20 years in global companies. And Deb, would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. My name is Deb Best. I am the owner and principal of Deb Best Practices. I have more than 33 years of HR experience, 12 years in my own consulting business, many years, mediating conflict and helping people play well together in the work sandbox. And, these tools came to me later in my career, both mediation training and assessments, and I find them invaluable because the big thing about these are whether you're team building or coaching someone, is that you're doing knowledge transfer. You're teaching them how to fish. You don't always need Al or Deb to come in and help you figure this out.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I'm watching the chat. So the 6 parts that we covered that Google helped define in 2015 for psychological safety, just the kind of in the Wayback Machine, here we go, were, this, I'll do the Scooby-Doo, diddle-diddle-diddle. So, being able to take risks without fear of being negative, of being punished, or being reassessed in who you are, disagree, speak truth, raise problems, ask questions, make mistakes, and be your authentic self. So those are the 6 pieces they talk about. Now, these are what I would kind of call your behavior indicators, right? Your behavioral indicators. These don't necessarily mean having these tells you that it is a good indication that you have psychological safety, but there are psychosocial hazards and risks that you have to look out for in order to create and reinforce that. So I don't know why that's doing that. Let's move on to why assessments. So this one is supposed to be a picture of building a foundation.
There you go.
So Deb, how does understanding each other, ourselves and the people we work with at this level of assessment, the data that you talked about, a quantified way,
Yes.
How does that help create that foundation that we're looking for?
Well, again, oxygen mask on yourself. If you don't trust yourself, then how are you going to be able to trust others? And Al, again, you're the psychologist, not me. But that self-trust is essential to know who you are, to feel confident in who you are, that you're a good, we've been talking all morning. We were just talking about, to know who you are and to feel good about that. You're a good person. To enter into interactions with other people, it's really important for that to be a good foundation of trust for yourself, self-trust, before you can then build a foundation of trust with others. But it's frankly the same process. It's using the data to validate, the cookbook. What's the cookbook about you? What's the scorecard about, how you're interacting with whoever you're in a room with, but also what's the cookbook about that?
Yeah, that's great. And so those assessments give us that, as you said, the cookbook, those quantified data points that tell us not just opinion, but insight into the things that give us energy. Yep. So those are some reasons why using assessments, and Deb and I are going to go through using DISC and using PI in a minute. But I want to share with you guys just as I was thinking about this assessment piece, I wanted to share with you some of my experiences and watch outs in using assessments. These are things that I've seen go awry when we use our powers. Maybe I always say using your powers for evil instead of good. And so, one of them is to judge other people who are of a certain profile that's different from yours, right? So when and also to judge our own. And PI is a great example of when I received my assessment, I was offended that it said that I'm very collaborative. How dare they say, this judgment of why can't I be better and different, as opposed to understanding that and leaning into the things that make you unique and special, and feeling confident. That's that authentic self. That's part of psychological safety, as we saw. But judging other people, I've seen this happen where people will like, oh, we're not going to, and she's a this, or they're fill in the blank, right? The color, the disc, the Myers-Briggs, those can be used as a form of judgment. Because people can flex.
Absolutely.
Right? Some other things are kind of, in addition to that, is labeling someone as, they are that, like they are a captain, they are a persuader, they are, yes, that's how they get their energy, but that's not the only thing that they can do. And so putting labels on people. And the other one I see is using it, well, I think I have a slide for that. Maybe I don't, is using it as an excuse for behavior. Yeah. Well, I'm not good at that because I could say I'm not good at sharing the room because I'm an off the chart 3 Sigma A.
Yeah. I have a very strong DI profile on the edge of the circle. So I can't flex at all. We absolutely can flex at all. We can flex a lot. It's a matter of how much energy do you want to spend flexing. Everybody can flex into any of these assessment strength areas that we're talking about. It's how much energy do you want to expend? But and I think it also gets into, and again, psychologist, not psychologist, it gets into, neurodiversity. That, why can't I just communicate with everybody like I communicate? That's I think also, that helps also build psychological safety. But yeah, I mean, I had an incident with Myers-Briggs where a couple of guys I worked with in an HR group 30 years ago didn't understand why I was in HR. We went through a team building with Myers-Briggs. They came to my office and they said, well, now we understand it's the way you're wired. You can't help it.
Mm.
I was like, okay, that's progress. But I said, no, you know what? I have a value center. My ethics don't necessarily match the way I naturally communicate. So I have to flex to meet my values. So I think that's very important to understand as well.
Yeah, so we learn a lot about values in our resiliency training. We learn
Yes,
a
we
lot
do.
about leaning into our strengths, but being respectful of others. And so that kind of takes me to my other watch out, which is, and I've seen this before as well, is kind of being othered when you don't have the same profile as the rest of the group, right?
That's right.
How many of us have been in one of those classes where, okay, stand in the corner if you're this, and then there's the one lone person in the corner. And I've seen it, especially when you use something like a PI, where you use it for a selection and for hiring. You want to be able to create space where people can be different, they can take risks, and they can make mistakes. And so that shouldn't mean that they get ostracized as a result.
Agreed.
Here's my free pass. My free pass to be, well, this is adults. My free pass to be an ass that, based on my assessment.
I love that.
All right. So let's talk. Go ahead, Deb.
We have some great comments in chat. I love what Radha's saying about curiosity, that not only does it give us additional data, it also feeds our what we should be curious about ourselves. We should be curious about others. And I also like what Yosef says, why fit in when you were born to stand out?
Love that.
Isn't
love
that
that.
great? Love
That's
it.
Fantastic.
But go ahead.
Actually, in the chat, if you guys don't mind, so Deb and I have shared our opinion of why we think assessments are helpful for psychological safety. If anybody have anything they want to add as far as either watch outs or ways in which assessments, are really almost essential to psychological safety. I think while we're waiting for that, if anybody has anything to add, I mean, trust is really a foundation, right? And so how do you build trust? Well, you build it with transparency and vulnerability. And how do you do that? You share more about who you are. And assessments give us that database quantitative insight into who we are as humans. So speaking of who we are as humans, let's talk about using PI. So one of the things that I think about when I think about psychological safety is about creating space for people to bring their gifts to work, right? And so with PI and understanding, if you haven't seen PI before, where we fall in the quadrants, what can be really interesting is if people are experiencing stress, where are they residing as far as there's where they get their energy, right? So PI is all about my drivers and where I get my energy. Thank you, Chris, for adding in, helps build empathy. I think that's fantastic too. Like we get to really understand each other, and get to appreciate the value that we bring when we ask questions, when we point out our perspectives, which is what is the foundation of psychological safety. So one thing to watch out with PI is if you are being stretched into the diagonal. So I use this metaphor in my class, which is, when I'm in my in flow, right? When I'm in my place where I am using my energy and I'm being able to use what drives me, it's like I'm walking on a flat surface, right? If I'm being stretched to kind of one over, it's like being on an incline, like I'm having to I'm having to breathe a little heavy. I'm going up that incline. But if I have to stretch all the way across the opposite, I can do it, but it's a pretty steep climb. It may be as much as a rock climb, right? It may be a full one of these. And so thinking about that it's not impossible. It just takes a lot of energy. And so being aware of other people and what they bring to the organization can help give us those insights so that we can build that trust, build that connection, and also create that psychological safety in how we're able to talk about ideas with respect, but still respect each other.
Al, before we move to DISC, Youssef, once again, I think the key for organization is not to fall in KPI-driven objectives, but to explain that it's about culture and continuous improvement. The beauty of the PI, when you use it, especially in this team mode, is that you can layer your goals and your KPIs with this type of scenario, this type of report, where the DISC is, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but to be able to lay a strategic goals over this, I think that is a strength of PI that I have discovered versus using DISC.
Yeah, it's a great way for us to see where our strategies fit within our skills and capabilities, where we have gaps, right? And being honest and transparent about that.
Yeah.
So let's move over to DISC real quickly, and then we'll open up for any additional questions. I'm just trying to keep track of everything. Go ahead, Deb.
So for the last 7 years, I have used DISC for coaching, for mediation, and for team building and coaching. And it's a really deep dive type of assessment. It can, depending on if it's a management, leadership, or a workplace assessment, it can give you anywhere from 30 to 50 pages about you. And also it's a big cookbook, give you a cookbook on how do you best communicate with other styles. What are your needs for communication? What are their needs for communication? And how do you have a conversation that takes everybody's needs into account? And then just like PI has a comparison report between two people, so does the DISC. And I have to tell you, the comparison reports about, when you talk about psychological safety and fear of conflict, fear of self-conflict, fear of conflict with another, those comparison reports, they are fabulous 2 to 3 page reports about what do you need in certain situations and certain interactions, and what does the other person need. So I think that those two, in both assessments, those two reports are platinum in terms of building psychological safety for the self and for the other.
That's a great ad. Let's make sure I'm not muted. That's a great ad. Those reports, I've used those several times for kind of peer coaching.
Yes.
They jokingly call them couples counseling.
Yeah.
I asked the group if there's any assessments that you like to use in this space. We're just talking about 2, and very briefly, we do these table talks in 30 minutes, so we're going fast. And so there's some in here I've never heard of person analysis. So that's
yes, I haven't either. That's great.
Yes. Strengths is another one that we use in our class because, again,
yeah,
it's about finding that part that makes us unique and special, and it can be very helpful in that way. And so as we kind of wrap up, and kind of open up for questions, I just want to kind of reiterate we're not focused on all of the 3 dimensions of psychological safety in today's talk. We're just looking at that piece around expectations of behavior. There are other things that impact our psychosocial, hazards and risks, such as our external environment and our organizational structure. And so normally we talk about all 3. This time we're just diving deep on one area.
Yep.
And so connect with us. This is Deb's LinkedIn profile. There's mine. And I do want to share that we are launching if you're in HR, a new app in concert with Kite, which is the KITE program is called KITE HR. So this is about the well-being of HR teams. And so we have several different programs within there, things like HR self-care, bouncing back when something goes wrong, dealing with difficult clients, managing compassion fatigue, all the things that are unique and special to the emotional well-being of HR professionals. And if you would like, we got 20% off. So if you want to find out more, you can also private message me or go to our website, which is thekiteprogram.com, and you can click HR. And then we have a dedicated psychological safety page. This is not accessible on our regular menu. You can only get it here. And so thank you for joining. So on there, I have a psychological safety calculator, as well as links to the ISO 45003, which if you're interested in psychological health and safety, I highly recommend taking a look at that. It has the global guidelines for psychological safety in our organizations, and it gives very scientific and clear guides about how to create that in your organization. And then I have a one-pager I made on common hazards based on some academic research that I've read. And then upcoming next week, we're going to be talking about using emotional agility to grow psychological safety within your organization from a leader perspective. We have a double feature coming up in May. We're going to be talking about the addressing conflict and mediation. So another mediator, Deb, and yes. Also mergers and acquisitions. Talk about, like I said, 60% of organizations are looking to acquire other companies. So that's a lot of families blending and coming together.
Great tools, Al. Thank you for sharing those.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So with that, let me open up to see if there are any questions in our final couple minutes.
Should people talk or should they put it in the chat?
Let's do it in the chat if we can, just because we have a larger group today.
Yes, we do.
Yes, there is ISO 45003 training on there. I mean, it's not a difficult read, but it's absolutely fascinating, the things they have in there. And of course, you can always work with a consultant like us who can help you. Shameless plug.
Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. Thank you, Radha. All right, everyone. Well, hopefully you took away one tip on how to use assessments to help reinforce psychological safety. As a reminder, again, we've got those three components: your structure, the external environment, as well as our expectations on behavior. So we want to look at all three of those. And thank you so much, Deb, for bringing your experience and insights for our quick talk around psychological safety.
Well, I also want to thank everyone who participated in the chat. You provided as much information as we did, and I always want to learn one new thing at least with every interaction, and you gave me several. So thanks to everybody who participated in chat.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you in the next time we meet.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.